Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And, you know, we're just getting started. So, welcome. This is going to be another thought provoking Real Talk Food Safety with us. And we are going to dive deep into technical leadership, food safety culture, all the things.
That's what we talk about on Real Talk. And we are excited that you all join us each week on Wednesdays at this special time, noon in the Eastern time zone area. We had the time change this past Sunday for the ones that's listening that go through daylight savings. And I have a toddler, so it's been an interesting week, let's say that.
It's always a transition. And we know it's coming, but it's still right. Still, I don't know why. I shouldn't say catches us me by surprise, but I'm still
Yeah.
like, oh, it feels late or oh, it feels early. Yeah,
Yeah. It's like our bodies, right? Like it's just trying
they're
to
messing with our
adjust.
clock. They're
Yeah,
messing with our internal clock.
yes. Today was the first day that, so you all know I have a daughter, Tiana. She'll be 19 months on the 10th. She's growing up. But this was the first day that she woke up early, but she like did not cry. So she kind of like stayed in her crib and kind of like laughed and like do whatever toddlers do, right? But just the time switch. She's like up at least an hour before she's supposed to be up, right? And that means we're up.
All the things.
All the things. All the things.
Yeah. All right. So we're curious if you're out there, if you do daylight savings, how has it been? And
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't, I know that impacts you as well because, for
Yeah.
example, we were scheduling some time with someone in Arizona.
Yeah.
And right, it was before the daylight savings shift. And they're like, okay, let's think about how this goes because that's a different time for you all. And I was
Right.
like, oh, very true.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm gonna let we use Google Calendar, so I'm like, I'm gonna let Google kind of figure that out.
Right. Like you can make auto adjustments.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
yes, tell us in the chat, say hello, let us know where you are watching from. We always love to hear that and see that. If you're watching on replay, use our hashtag replay because
Mhm.
all of our videos go up on our blog, is linked to our YouTube. So please, like, let us know if you're listening on replay as well.
Yeah, because today we're talking about the keys to unlocking your leadership. And really, it's even bringing your leadership to a new level because we are all on this quest to improve culture together.
Yes, absolutely. And this has been like top of mind, right? Like as we talk about food safety culture, right? Like for us, and if you've been here, right? Like, leadership is a huge piece of culture that we have a huge passion for. And so, like, people forget about leadership in people and that aspect that we need when we talk about food safety culture. And so we bring you all those things each week. And as if you follow us on LinkedIn or have conversations with us or work with us, you know that that's how we lead our organization is people first and really focusing on how do you become a more human centric organization? How do you become a more organization where you are putting people first, not just in the way that you talk about it, but in what you do every day?
Yeah. Yep. And so if it's your first time joining us here, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Yes.
Uh, Here at Catalyst, our mission, like Tia talked about, is to transform how people lead in food because we want people to live authentically, achieve more, and enable business growth.
Yes. Absolutely.
Those
Hi,
things can
Valerie.
all coexist together.
They can. And we make it possible for our clients to do that every day.
Yes. Hey, Val, good to see you.
Yes. And yeah, it's not a good time. It's not a
It is
good time.
not. No.
I'm the one that's like, please get rid of daylight savings for the sake of parents with toddlers.
It's true. Well, maybe we just need to bring some awareness around what's actually going on.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's
The
that's
things
my
we're
segue into our self reflection.
right for all my speeches to the Senate. I'll be able to talk about awareness, right,
Mhm.
of others and of self.
Yeah, and I always think it's really fascinating because when we talk about self-awareness, especially in, I'm going to say kind of in the leadership space, it's often understood as this recognizing what you're good at, what you're not good at, like what you're working to improve, and really kind of having this confidence to fully own your strengths, but yet also really understanding like that's not my strength.
Yeah.
But when we talk about awareness and this reflection today, this is really about how it takes that further.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
as leaders, we have blind spots that keep us from being the best leaders we can be. And we've talked about this before, right? Self awareness has been, I think, probably in like, don't quote me on the exact sources, but whether it's Forbes or Harvard Business Review, right? There's places that have said self awareness is what separates good leaders from great leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen it. Right. I've seen it in my career and with leaders that I've worked with. You are probably thinking about someone right now that you feel like is not self-aware, right? Or just even self-aware, but also even awareness of environment, right? That it makes it a struggle for you as someone that's, trying to follow the leader, right? Or work with that leader.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's fascinating because when we talk about self awareness, Tasha Urich, we've referred to her several times because she does research in this area. And she's found that 95% of people will raise their hand when we ask, are you self aware? But her research has shown that only 10% of people are truly aware.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's mind boggling.
it really is. It really is. And it makes you think about, like, even if you feel like you are self aware, you are probably self aware about some things, but not other things, right? Like, there's some blind spots or some areas that you might not be as self aware because maybe you haven't done the work around that part, right? Like, we're so complex as humans, and we grow, and we're different through the stages of our life. And so, like, you have to continuously be discovering yourself in many different situations. And it's hard to get all the situations, right? It's hard to even know when you're kind of shifting into another phase of your life. And so I think when I hear that stat, I think about that in the sense of, like, if you are, we talk about it even with leaders, right? Like, if you feel like you are self-aware or that you are a great leader, if you stop learning, right? If you stop bettering yourself, then eventually you're going to find that you have old ideas, or that you were self-aware, but now you're not because you're in a different phase of your life. And what is that stat we talk about all the time? Where, like, 44% of people are going to need new skills in the next 5 years. And so, like, that shift happens so fast that if you are not learning and immersing yourself in different things, like, you could be old news quick.
Absolutely. And a part of it is, we are in a society that while we say we should be self aware, it doesn't truly promote practices for people to be self aware. So,
Yeah.
for example, being busy is the badge of honor. Well, it's really hard to pause and get past the first few layers of your mind to have awareness. Because our minds, right, it's going to protect us. So if we're like, gosh, what am I not good at? It's not going to give you the good, bad, and ugly.
Right.
It's only going to give you the good because it wants to be like, hey, things are going well. Or it's going to be like the extreme distorted thoughts.
Yeah.
Like you need to be a faster runner because the bear is going to catch you. You're so slow. That's what it would say.
Right. You're so slow, the bear's going to catch you. I love that.
But to create space to really sit in this spot and ask questions. And you're going to see as we go through through today's show that there's a few things that we're going to talk about that can make a difference.
Yeah.
But it involves creating space to do this work and being intentional about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about this piece of external awareness?
Oh, yeah. Well, so right, awareness isn't just our internal. Because often we see ourselves through the lens of how others see us.
Yeah.
But that's not the whole story.
Yeah.
And I think about Brene Brown. You all know I'm a Brene Brown fan.
Let's have her book.
she gives a really good visual about, as humans, we wear masks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I might have this mask on. It's not, I mean, it's not like good, bad, ugly, nothing.
Yeah.
But like, this is how I show up for my family. This is how I show up for friends. This is how I show up at work. Like
Yeah.
all of those look a little different. And so each of those people in those spaces see us differently.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what's reflected back, then is that really a good representation of who we really are?
Yeah. Yeah. It's something to think about. And, some things that might be popping into your mind is like feedback and what are you hearing from others and how do you process that? We're going to get into that a little bit today too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about like what a self-aware leader looks like
Mm-hmm.
and how that extends to deeper levels.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think it's also important to think about like where we're at. You mentioned like different stages of life.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's different for people just because of our lived experiences,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like our lived experiences, I almost see that as like that pushes you into a different area, right? Or a different phase. And a lot of people think about like phases as like, okay, I'm a baby, I'm a toddler, I'm a preteen, I'm a teenager, I'm a young adult, and I'm going into my 30s, and now I'm in my 50s. Like people kind of think about it in terms of like age or whether they're in school or not in school, or maybe you might even be thinking about it in terms of like what position I'm in, right? Like I'm an individual contributor and now I'm managing others type thing. But exactly what you're talking about, Jill, life experiences also change us, right? And that's a piece of us moving and becoming a different person than we were. Like we think about like the extreme situations, right? Like we were in a car wreck or we won the lottery, right? Like then our lives change from those moments. But it's also those little experiences that we're having. It's those conversations that we're having, right? It's those projects that we go through at work or those, projects that we do at home. Those things are also changing us.
It is. And it's amazing. So even, right, kind of pulling some information together, one of the things that stood out was Better Up had shared that even being part of different groups changes our relationship to our identities. And part of that is, disparities in the workplace. So they talk specifically about women and people of color. And how often have we talked about, right? If there's a job description and a woman can do like only half of it, she'll be like, oh, I don't think I should apply. Versus there, I know it's a stereotype, but men will be like, I can do two, I'm in.
Yeah.
And so even this awareness that women frequently see themselves as less competent than they are.
Yeah.
Or Better Up even talked about, people of color can be navigating multiple identities and cultures because of hypersensitivity to the impact on others. And that can be draining.
Yeah.
So,
Even when you talk about like the, how you are in different spaces, right? It's like a piece of that you see with women of color is that happens, especially in corporate settings. And so like all of those pieces are driving, right, what others see, but also that awareness for ourselves, on like what we're getting from others, right? Because it's not like you're in a situation and you're like, okay, someone is going to judge me differently here, or these people don't really know me. But once you hear it, right, then whether it's feedback or whether it's just through conversations, your brain is trying to process, ooh, is that me, right? Like, is that the way that I come off as a leader or as a peer or as a teammate? And so to do that type of work, which we'll get into some steps to help unlock that for you. But you have to do that work, even if it's negative or even if it's positive. Like, oh wow, you're an amazing speaker. Like even to think about that and say, oh really, like what made it amazing for that person, right? What characteristics did they enjoy? And then what characteristics did I enjoy, right? Because they maybe thought it was amazing. And I was like, oh, I really don't want to do that piece again. But they thought it was great.
Yeah, it's all this awareness, which,
Mhm.
right, depending on our lived experience, depending on even like as how we think as a gender or different groups, whether it's race or orientation or right, there's this whole bucket that we talk about when it comes to the importance of understanding ourselves so we can better understand others.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about being a leader, if we're not creating these safe spaces that invite people in and that accept all our perspectives and who we are, like then we're not making a place where we're all going to thrive at work.
Yeah. And that's so important as a leader, right? Is really being able to not only realize yourself, right, and your impact, but also those around you so that you can bring out their gifts, right? So that you can help inspire them, right? So that you can help influence, right? And like you said, build those relationships and safe spaces and all those things when you think about culture is important. And so it's important for our own self-awareness, like you said, but bringing others with you is also a huge piece of this.
Yes. And this is where these things come together, right? All these organizations that are focused on food safety culture, food safety culture, food safety culture. Well, guess what? If we are leading today, if we lead today, this is how we're going to lead in the future. We are going to have the exact same culture we have today. That's the bottom line. And so when we think about how do we start shifting from where we are today to this future state over here that we all like are on the quest to find, it's going to take us to start looking at what we need to do different.
Yeah. I want to like pause at that sentence that you said around, if you're leading the same way you're leading today, right? As you think about your future, if it's the same, then your culture is going to be the same. Yeah. And so to think about that shift, that takes time, that takes effort, that takes intention, that takes a partner, right? Like that takes things where you have to step outside of what is comfortable, right? Like what is comfortable for me and my job, the way I'm leading, right? I have to do something different if I want something different in the future.
And like meaningfully different. So I think often that's the thing, right? We get into our habits and we create the plan, we work the plan, and then we wonder why we don't have what we were hoping to have. But that's because the underlying factors that are required to help have that shift, those things have not shifted.
And that's hard, right? Like that's not easy to do. It's not easy to say, I'm going to lead differently. I'm going to learn how to lead differently and implement it, right? On top of like all the other things you have going on with your job. And so it's not an easy thing to do. It's the reason why it takes years for culture, so for you to see culture shift, but it is 100% doable, right?
It is.
You just have to do something different than what you're doing today.
And that's why we have the 5 keys today to unlock self-reflection.
Yeah. When we like to think about like this self-reflection, self-awareness as like the starting point. Like you have to understand yourself before you can understand others and understand how you play with others, right? Like you have to understand yourself. So this is like the foundation for the work that we do. And I love talking about it, right? We love talking about it, which is the reason why it is a topic for today.
Yep. So let's dive in with key number 1, which is practice regular introspection.
So what does that look like, Jill? When you say practice regular introspection, sometimes people might be thinking, do I need to take up yoga or meditate?
Well, it won't hurt, but I think you have to find what works for you. Yeah. So, even if it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes a day, it's not, gosh, I need to spend an hour a day. Right. Yeah. But how do you even pause and go, what filled me up today? What drained me today? Simple questions can start us on the path of introspection.
Yeah. And you're right. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as little as 15 minutes, as 5 minutes,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes it could be something like meditation. It could be something like journaling, right? A lot of people journal and get their thoughts down that way. Some people write lists. Whatever it is for you to have that moment and ask yourself these questions to reflect. But you can also do it from a situation standpoint, right? Like, let me reflect on how that presentation went, or how the project went, or how that one-on-one went with my manager or with my team member. Setting aside that time to do it allows your brain, right, to focus on one thing versus all the tasks we have going on. It allows for you to get crystal clear around, okay, what do I need to focus on right now, so that those things can start coming to you on, what do you think went well? What do you think did not go well? What would you like to do differently in the future, if anything?
Yeah, and I would recommend that you make this part of a routine habit. So
Mm,
you can do it at other times, but I think the people that find the best results, and even if you ask leaders, like, how did you become great leaders? They talk about they created habits. So if
yeah.
you create a habit of, I spend 15 minutes a day, journaling is one of the best ways to do it. Meditation is another great way, but that can come in different forms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are many journaling prompts you can find online to help with this. Mark Manson, he does a great Monday email and he sends out questions for you to consider and to think about things.
Mm.
One of the things I'm doing this year before I turn 50 is I'm doing self study using yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. So each week
Mhm.
I have a different focus. So I think the part that sticks out in this is it has to be intentional.
It does.
And it has to be questions that you don't normally ask yourself. Otherwise, your brain will give you the same answers.
Yeah. It's about doing things differently.
Mhm.
Right before I came on, I was watching this clip of Oprah, and she was talking, and someone had asked her, she was actually on the Daily Show, and I think it was Trevor Noah that asked her around, like, how do you get what you want? Like, how do you get to where you want to go? And her answer was that a lot of people don't know where they want to go. They don't know what they want. And what she was talking about is that's like a huge piece, is first understanding, what do you want, not just what
Mhm.
other people want or what the expectations are. Like, what do you want, so that is clear, because we have so much going on in our mind, right? We have so much happening, and all these things like coming to us, is that sometimes we're just not clear
Yeah.
on, and this topic is what you want. But I think it also relates to this, in the sense of, we have things coming to us all the time, and a lot of times we're just not clear on what we want, what type of leader we want to be, what strengths do we have, where are opportunities, right, that we have, what are things that we don't want to do because it is not a part of our strengths and we don't want it to be. Like, just those things sometimes we're just not clear about, because we do not practice regular introspection. We don't set the time aside to be able to ask ourselves these questions and really get clear on what it is we want, or who it is we want to be, or where do we want to go, and how we want to lead.
Yeah. And I would say that probably comes up even as we talk about some of the other keys. But
Yeah.
this one is really about, like, create space.
Yeah.
Your brain is so busy all day processing that if you don't intentionally take time to override that default
Mhm.
setting, you will continue to have the same pattern.
Yeah.
You have That's one of the keys. This is one of the keys. You
Yeah.
need to create space so that you can process introspection,
Mhm.
self-reflection, whatever that looks like.
And we build this into our programs, right? We always build space to reflect, right, on what we've been practicing, the new tools that our teams are picking up on, right, and practicing, like, that time to just think about, like, what's working, what's not working, how do you want to shift, how do you want to practice it differently maybe next time. Like, we actually set that time aside to have those conversations, because of the benefits of exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that that leader can have that time, right? Number one, but also be able to reap the benefits of having this introspection time.
Yeah, really, it's our workbook. If you join our program, our workbook is full of introspective questions.
On purpose, right?
Yes.
Very intentional. Very
But it's
intentional.
also full of the things that are on key number two, which is to identify and process your emotions.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
It's
people
huge.
only recognize like the top five, like there's like five emotions people recognize: happy, angry, sad, frustrated, and there's one more. Like for the most part, when people process, like that's it.
Yeah.
But if you ever look at an emotion or a feeling wheel, emotion wheel, they're called different things. There are, it's like logarithmic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we get so busy just doing that we don't even pause to once again even be able to name what am I actually feeling,
Yeah.
or we do the superficial feeling like I'm angry. Angry is a cover for all the other things underneath.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to process those things underneath are really important if you're going to be not just a good leader, but a great leader.
Yes, yes. This is so important, and one that we're, again, really not taught to do. We're really not taught to name and be able to really understand the emotions. And that's hard to do, right? And maybe you're not able to dive deeper than angry right now. And that's okay too, right? But being able to recognize that you're having this feeling and being able to process that piece and figure out like, okay, what triggered this emotion?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this situation, this person, this process, this setting, right? That's causing this emotional response that I'm having. And that I think people talk about it when it's something that's like I'm frustrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or anxious. But it's also the same thing around like I am ecstatic about what's happening here, or I am, I have joy around
Mm-hmm.
because we want more of that, right? So being able to understand where that's coming from and what triggers those positive emotions, that's also important because we want more of those things.
Yeah, and I think the other part is we often attach emotions with judgment,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm feeling, challenged, right, that could be good or bad. If I'm feeling angry, we often think, well, that's kind of a bad emotion.
Yeah.
And you know what? They are all just clues to something that lies beneath.
That's it. Yeah.
So I think when we think about emotions, like I remember once having my kids, like they were crying. And I was like, you need to stop crying. You need to stop crying. Right. Because to me, it wasn't like worthy enough to be crying about. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm teaching them to not connect with their emotions.
Yeah.
I was judging the situation instead of being like, gosh, right? What is that for? Where are those tears
Yeah.
coming from?
Yeah.
And not judging it, but letting it be and being curious to know what the actual cause is.
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing them to express it,
Yeah.
right? Without that judgment. I mean, that's like big, like you all know, I talked about it earlier, like I'm in toddler mode. And he doesn't have a lot of words right now, but we really try to focus on using words and exactly what you're saying, Jill, crying. Tell me why are you crying? Why do you feel this way? Like how, like just getting to the root cause of those things, but making it a safe space to be able to express those emotions.
And I think, and part of it is strong emotions can make people uncomfortable,
Mm,
right? When we see someone who's angry, we're like, like, oh my gosh, they're so angry. And it's okay to be like, to acknowledge that and say, you can have that emotion. You can express
yeah.
that emotion without judgment, because that may be the processing that helps get to the next state. Because
Yeah.
emotion is energy motion, right?
Yeah.
Emotion, energy motion. When it gets stuck, that's when we find things like the frustration, the anger, because we cannot process it, even like cellularly.
Yes.
So, how do we really give space to people without that judgment? And it is hard, right?
Yeah.
We haven't been taught to do that. It's
Mhm.
not often modeled for us.
Yeah.
But to be a leader, we have to be willing to create that space so people feel safe,
Yeah.
to be able to have the emotions, to be able
Mhm.
to process what that means.
Yeah, and sometimes the emotions are masked,
Mhm.
meaning that you might hear terms or phrases like, oh, that person doesn't care.
Mhm.
Right? Like there's some emotion there happening with that person around like, why do people feel like they don't care? Right? I've never run into a situation where people do not care. So, but there's always an underlining emotions around frustration or the feeling of not being heard or all the, it could be any of those things. But getting to the root cause of, that's interesting. Let me dive a little bit deeper to find what emotions are there, right? And being able to create that safe space for them so that they will express it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could show up as, oh, well, we want to do this project, but there's always this one blocker. This person's always going to bring up the negative, or they're always going to say no, or they're always going to try to stop us here. They're a roadblock. Like, I'm like literally hearing these stories of people saying, oh yeah, you just have to get Tia on board because Tia is going to say no and Tia is going to do, like when I hear that, I'm like, okay, like that gives me a little insight so that I can have a conversation because there's always an emotion tied to it. So if I can get that person to identify that emotion, name it, right? Communicate it to me, then I can better understand what they value, right? And what they believe, and then how we can move collectively as a group to whatever the next step is. And that's all about bringing others with you, right? Like making sure that not only you can identify and process your emotions, but allowing space so that others can do that too.
Which in part goes into key number 3, which is to seek input and feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes when we have emotions, they may be really like other people may see them and notice something we never know.
Yes.
Something we haven't caught or something about the situation. And so it's not just emotions, but like in general, when we can seek input and feedback from others, that is what will help propel us into great leadership versus just good leadership.
Absolutely. It helps us identify those blind spots, right? Like, again, as we move and shift who we are and what we're doing, we have these blind spots that we want to make sure that come to the light. Mm-hmm. And so talking with trusted peers and mentors, sponsors, friends, family, even, right, can give you those observations or that feedback that may be blind spots for you as a leader.
Yeah, and I think along with that, so one of the things we talk about in boot camp is that you can be intentional in asking for feedback.
Yeah.
So instead of the blanket of like, how did I do?
Yeah.
How did that go? Like, that's not actually asking for feedback. That's really more of like, I'm asking for confirmation, like it was fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you ask for feedback, this too, once again, to be a great leader needs to be intentional.
Yeah.
So instead of how did I do, it's I am really working on how I connect with the audience in my presentation or in my meetings. Would you be able to give me some feedback on how that looks from your seat at the table after this meeting?
Yeah. That's awesome. And I've done that before with my peers on like, I'm really trying to have a clear, concise message. After this presentation, will you give me the feedback on was it clear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or I'm trying to create more space so that I can be a better listener and enable you to step into your power and like own your role more than me trying to like oversee it. Can you help me with that? Yeah. And tell me how that feels from your end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've done that too on, hey, I'm trying to.
Ooh, what other examples can I have and see if Tia did those too? No.
Yeah. But it's so interesting because it's like, and that's why we're on this path together, right? Yeah. That we've had these experiences where we've done well, some we haven't done as well, right? And that we reflected and needed to go back, where we've had these conversations. It's like, it's that experience, right? Being able to have these conversations in different areas, right? Like we didn't work for the same companies, or we didn't have the same managers or the same leaders, right? We've never been under the same umbrella, but our situations have been similar of how we lead, what type of leaders we need to support, how to create safe spaces and build relationships, and even how to seek feedback, right? And input, and why it's so impactful right, for those to do it in a way of asking specifically for feedback versus saying, how did my presentation go? And so these are examples as you think about even in your own career, right? Like no one has worked where you are, right? Like
Yeah.
we haven't had the same leader as you have or the same peers as you have. But try these things, right? Like try asking specifically for feedback the way that, one of us have worded something or tweak it, right, to make sense for your project or your presentation or whatever you happen to go through, and see, right? See how that feels for you and what feedback you get. And a
Yeah.
piece of that is asking questions, but there's also tools, right? There's also tools to help. We've heard of 360 feedback, right? There's also a Kajari window. I gotta
Oh,
look up the exact name, but it's completely free. I can also add the link after our live, but it's completely free. And you go online and you actually send a link to people, and they fill out these descriptive words about you, and it helps populate the things of like what you think you are, what type of leader you think you are, and then what type of leader someone else thinks you are. And it helps kind of separate it into these 4 quadrants of like what's known to you and known to others, all the way down to, what's not known to you, but known to others, which are your blind spot. And even things that are not known to you and not known to others.
yeah.
So
It's complicated.
it's one of those tools to at least, it's completely free, number one. So it's easy to find and do, and there's no cost, but it's like that tool that you can use to start connecting with others and getting some of this feedback and input from trusted peers.
Yes. And I love that someone suggested even Toastmasters, right?
Yes.
There are other resources within perhaps your community. There's a ton of things online.
Yeah.
So once again, if you're intentional about being a better leader, there are definitely resources to be able to help you on that journey.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that up.
Yes.
Toastmasters is amazing. Whether or not
So,
some organizations participate in Toastmasters, some don't. But you can find like a local Toastmasters. So
absolutely.
thank you for sharing that.
Yes. So key number 4 is to challenge your own assumptions and beliefs.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this when you were talking about being in a different group, right, and opening your circle to different people, this is the one that it made me think about. Oh, Claire, I can put it. I'm gonna add it in the link afterwards, and I'll tag you.
Yeah, and
I'll just
you
go.
talked about the window, and I don't remember the name of it too, but I know exactly what you're talking about. But
Yeah. I'll add it to the comment. So if anyone's watching this, find us on LinkedIn. We can also make sure that we have a link on our YouTube, so that you can just grab it right after.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this key about we need to be willing to look at the things that we have believed for so long,
Mm-hmm.
because once again, our lived experiences are some of the things that create what we believe
Yeah.
and reinforce those. And
Yeah.
as we have new experiences, or we're looking to create new experiences, we have to really be willing to say, do these beliefs, it's almost like the pack of beliefs, right? The Santa pack of like, do all these things need to come with me? Do they serve us? Do they honor us? Do they create some of the blind spots that I don't even know about?
Yeah.
That is really hard because
Mhm.
this is one of those
Yeah.
core things that we bring with us.
Yeah. I was just about to say, I think this is probably the hardest point, at least for me, is that as humans, right? Like we feel like we have our own glasses, right? And we feel that what we have gone through or what we've seen is like the absolute truth, right? And it may be for some people. A lot of times, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind, right, and being able to even challenge your own self and say that my lived experience is my lived experience.
Yes.
Exactly that.
And I was just on a call with someone, and we were actually talking about their USDA inspectors. Not right, wrong, anything, but their previous experience had been probably that it was a little more challenging. And
Mm.
we know regulatory relationships, we hope, are all transitioning to be a little more collaborative. And I think many have done great work in that space. But it's interesting because if you had the experience of, gosh, that wasn't a good experience, it feels like we always had a combative relationship, it wasn't collaborative, that person had moved to a different organization and they were, that comes with them. They were
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not really sure how this is going to go. I'm not sure where this is going to be. And they look at it through that lens.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
what we were talking about is, gosh, what do we all know about this? Like,
Hmm.
what is this person's background and what are they bringing to the table that could be differently than what we've had before?
Yeah.
And I use that just hopefully as a connection because I think most people that join us have this reference point of regulators.
Yeah.
But the same thing applies to us about people, programs, processes, all the things.
Yes, yes. I remember someone was talking on one of our past shows, and we were kind of having this conversation around, there was someone that every organization they were going to felt like the culture was very similar, which was a toxic culture.
Funny.
And you were asking the question of, right? Like you've been in three different organizations, let's say three different organizations, and this toxic culture, it almost seems like it's following you, right? So taking a look at yourself, how are you contributing, right? What are your beliefs around the way a culture should function,
Yeah.
right? And how does that relate to where you are today versus like your last two companies that you were at? And that just reminds me, I remember someone in the comments was like, wow, I've never actually thought about how I'm contributing to each of these cultures, right? And what I'm doing to, I don't know, bring toxicity in or contribute to the toxic culture that's there. And,
Yeah.
and if
Or
we think about like, what am I going to do differently? Like, yeah, I feel like this culture is toxic. What am I going to do differently?
yes. And I think that's why like this challenging your assumptions and beliefs partner so well with the introspection
Yeah.
to be able to sit and be like, does this still serve me?
Mm,
And it's
hmm.
amazing if we can create the space to pause. We may have to ask more than once and explore it more than once, but you will find those answers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I like how you said that too. You might have to ask that question more than once
Mhm.
and explore it more than once. Like this stuff is hard, right?
Oh,
Like if it was easy, we all would be doing it all day, every day. Right? Like we would all be like, yeah, I challenge my assumptions and beliefs and I can switch what at the drop of a hat, right? I can change. We can't. It's hard. You have
no.
you have to be intentional and set up that time to really be able to challenge yourself, right? And be able to ask yourself those hard questions.
Yeah, and think about it once again as progress, not perfection.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
even I have seasons where I'm like, I am really good at my daily habits of like reading something that's, kind of fulfilling and meditating and doing some of these things that we've talked about. But then I have other seasons where,
Mm,
the things that I'm scheduling don't create that same space and
yeah.
it looks a little different.
Mm,
And so those are things like try things, try different things.
yeah.
It's not about doing it like some people meditation just drives them bonkers to think about it.
Yeah.
That's maybe not your thing. Maybe a walk in nature helps you clear your mind and create some space. Find what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of this oh, sorry.
Well, I love what you said, Jill, around, you even are in different seasons and you're trying different things. It's like, you don't have to stick with the same thing.
No,
Yeah.
in fact, sometimes I get overwhelmed because, right, I'm supposed to do affirmations, visualization, meditation, my yoga, and I'm like, I got work to do. Like, I have a family that needs me. I can't be doing all these things. Really,
Yeah.
that's what I think. And so what I do is I pick what one or two things maybe call or serve me right now,
Yeah.
and I do those. And I reevaluate that when those things start feeling hard, or I maybe if like skip them because of whatever's going on in life, then sometimes I have to pause and go, all right, clearly I'm not making time for that right now.
Mm,
What can I be doing differently?
yeah. Yeah.
So even that's pausing.
Yeah, I think that's
But
great.
all of that goes into our key number 5, which is aligning our values with action.
Ooh, yes. Yes. That is big. That's big. Because if we find that we're not, right, some of those things, it's like we don't feel right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we're talking about today, if I value being a great leader to empower other people and unleash their talents and gifts, if I don't align my actions to do some of this work, where does that leave me?
Yeah. Yeah. And really aligning those pieces, right? Your values and your daily actions and behaviors, decisions, right? Like that ensures you have that integrity, right?
Mhm.
That authenticity, right? That you're staying true to yourself. Otherwise, it won't feel right. It'll feel like you're out of alignment, or
Mhm.
that you sometimes it might feel like you're just doing actions, but it's not really connecting to you.
Mhm. Yeah, I often share the story that when I first was promoted to a position to oversee multiple plants,
Mhm.
like I put the leadership mask on that I thought that everybody needed or wanted to see, and it felt not right. It
Yeah.
was like scratchy, itchy, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? That's because what I saw or what worked for maybe others, that was not my style. It
Yeah.
didn't align with who I was as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's also important about this, that even our organizations will have a set of values that they're like, here are our values. Well, guess what? I have values that are not the same as those.
Mhm.
And I need to bring my core values to work because that's what helps me live authentically. I'm
Yeah.
not ignoring these, but that's a whole nother conversation. We're going to talk about how these things link.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think too often we think, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to show up and be like this because that's what I've been told needs to happen. This is how it needs to be. But really, like, bring yourself. The
Yeah.
best version of yourself is you. And so aligning your values with how you show up and how you lead is the most important part.
Yeah, I think so. And I feel like when we don't show up as our true self and we're trying to, be someone else or have these traits of what we think works, like I think our teams, they notice. Like they might not
They
say,
feel
"Oh
it.
man, that's not really Jill," right? Like they might not know you like that, but they feel like something's off.
Yeah. We've all had people where like, well, they're really nice, but
Yes.
like I don't quite like we don't quite just jive together. We don't quite just connect it this way. It's something.
Something, right? It's something in the way that they lead. It's something in the way that, and it's like And then those things, right, just snowball into other things on trust, right? When you think about building relationships and creating safe spaces, trust is at the core. And if people feel like you're not being your authentic self, then it's really hard to build trust.
It is
You know?
very much so.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know we've talked about a lot of things today, and I always try to be mindful of time. So let's just do a quick review. The 5 keys for unlocking this self reflection so you can be not just a good leader, but a great leader.
Hmm. Hmm.
Create a practice of regular introspection. Identify and process your emotions. Seek input and feedback. Number 4 is challenge your assumptions and beliefs.
Hmm.
And the last one is align values with action.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we know because we see it, but also, data really tells us that the more you know and understand yourself through consistent self-reflection, the more effective you can be as an empowering transformational leader.
Yeah.
We there's that direct link between leaders who have self-reflection and who are self-aware and use it, right? And leaders who do not.
Yeah. And I know sometimes those can be a lot of things. And as a leader, there's 2 questions that I always think about that can help, not necessarily summarize all this, but can help you navigate all of
Mhm.
it forward. Like asking yourself, what do I need to learn or understand more about this situation, the people, or myself?
Yeah.
And not just, once again, this is like 5 whys, not the surface level, the first question answer that comes to mind, but continue to ask what else, what else, what else.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one, how am I or how have I contributed to this situation?
Yeah.
And once again, the multiple asking of like, how else have I? How else have I? How else?
Yeah. Yeah. I like
Those will help you get some reflection and understand values, and it
Yeah.
will pull some of these items together.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't know where to start with one of these questions and ask yourself, right? And you'll find that, man, maybe I hadn't thought about this.
Yeah.
Right. And so your what else, right? Like you might get stuck and say, I don't know. I really need to think about this a little bit more. And maybe that's what you think about for the week, right? Or for a couple of days, whatever you need, right? To be able to be more self-aware within yourself and to grow.
Yeah.
I was saying, like, ask yourself the hard questions or come to us because we can also ask you some hard questions.
Right. But I mean, here's our shameless plug, right? This is what we do. And this is why we do it, because we know when we are technical experts, our default is to become more technically expert.
Yeah.
Increase our technical expertise, which is awesome. But if we don't develop the leadership skills to be great leaders, no amount of knowing all the technical things is going to get us anywhere. Right? That all falls to the wayside if we don't know how to lead people and bring them along with us.
Right. Exactly. We just have all this knowledge, but we're not able to communicate it and effectively, right, impact.
Yeah. And that's why. So if you haven't already seen it, we'll also put this in the link. But tomorrow, we're doing a webinar with Ben Miller from TAG. It's a holistic approach to understanding and improving food safety culture. We're super excited, yes, about pulling these parts together because people keep asking, how do I really do food safety culture? What's the next step in food safety culture? Or, right, we've been collecting data and we've tried things, but we haven't really moved to food safety culture.
Yeah.
Then you need to be there. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. Central, which is 2 p.m. Eastern. I knew I could get it right. And I'll drop the registration link in the comments for everybody.
Jill in her time zones.
I'm challenged, and that is not a blind spot. So,
but we accept. Yes. So we hope to see you tomorrow. And we also hope to see you next week.
Yes. And next week we have Susan Hall, the author of Decide Happy, is joining us. We're so excited to introduce her to you, the audience, and have you interact with her. She's a fantastic woman with an amazing story.
Yes. Yes. So we're excited about bringing her to our audience to have conversations and discuss. So please make sure to join us right back here next week, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, Mountain Time, Pacific. You guys are on your own, but you know what time.
You know what time to show up.
I know.
Follow our page. If you follow our Catalyst page on LinkedIn right, it will tell you every time we go live.
Yes.
And when we put new events out there. So go out there if you haven't already. We would love and appreciate if you follow us.
Yes, absolutely. And to the people that's here today, thank you so much for joining in the conversation with us, adding your perspective. We'll make sure to link in the resource to kind of help you on your path as you become more self-aware and have self-reflection and really just on your path to becoming an even better leader.
Yeah. Yep. Better together. So
better together.
Make it a great week, everybody.
Yes.
We'll see you next week.
Tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow. All right.
Bye.
Bye.